Welcome back to C3's Crucial Truth with your host, me, Alan Cole. Mm, let's move on to question number two. Question number two is a two-parter. It's why have I never heard of C3 Comics? And also, when will C3 Comics be at your local comic book store? Yeah. Um, I don't know why you've never heard of C3 Comics. We're all over the internet. However, I will say that over the past few years, we have not focused as much on social media as we probably should have. We took a more traditional approach to building our publishing company. Not to say that it's wrong, but we pretty much are 80, 70 babies. So, and then we started to take publishing seriously at the time of the comic bust. So there were a bunch of comic retailers closing their doors, unfortunately. And the fact that we didn't really know, we were more enthusiastic creatively than that we knew about the industry. So this journey that we've been on for, you know, 21 years at this point, man, it's a long time. But this journey that we've been on, we have learned a lot about the industry. I myself have actually worked in a comic book store, so it's specifically doing the ordering for Diamond, and it definitely opened my eyes to the relevance of Marvel and DC within the comic book industry, especially as it pertains to the indie scene. Um, I think Marvel and DC kind of get a bad hand dealt to them because just like with everything else, just like with most people, honestly, that go into most people that go into self-publishing. You start with the whole thing was, oh, I don't like what Marvel and DC are doing with their characters. They don't understand their characters. They're coming up with stupid stories. They're not being true to them. Why are they restarting this? Why? It's always a why. And so you start off with grand ideas to create your own characters. And the thing is, no one really understands until you get into it how hard it is and how much more than just your creativity you're managing. So what Marvel and DC and Image and other, like, Dark Horse Comics, Boom Studios, Aspen, what they're doing, they're juggling multiple things at the same time. And from the outside looking in, we think it's also simple. Let's just tell this story. Let's just get it out there. And I can say it's thoroughly frustrating to try to get people to pick up on your property and to follow you, which of course is a trickle-down effect because, if you don't really have that many people following you, it's very hard to build revenue so that you can continue on. So there is an expectation that, yeah, you do this, you do X amount of issues, and then I'll follow you. You tell me why I should be following you, which is not a problem at all. Like, that's the way it's supposed to be. However, going through that struggle, though, to try to get people to pick your book up and not just pick it up, but to also want to pick up the next issue. And just not want to pick up the next issue, but to actually want to pay for your next issue. You understand why Marvel and DC, in a grand way, are kind of reluctant to make any major changes because once you it's very enticing that once you do find that sweet spot where at least you have guaranteed money coming in, a guaranteed stream coming in, being experimental is not where it is. Of course, I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to have disagreements with me on that point. But I'm going to say it's not really a point to be disagreed with. Like, that's the reality of the situation. When you're dealing with X amount of dollars, and you have X amount of dollars guaranteed to come in if it's done this way, then you continue to do it that way until those dollars run out. Now, I will say that in Marvel's spat with Sony, they did do something that was experimental, that was very indie-esque, where they stopped publishing X-Men and Fantastic Four. So they have found a way to fit that in creatively within their lineup, but they did it for a reason that was not creative at all. And those are the kind of risks that I would say that indie companies make all the time. It's just that indie companies are doing it, and there's little recourse outside of the creator's passion or the creators want for people to follow their story. So, as I said earlier, we've been doing this for a long time. We've been through the ups and downs. We've been through conventions. We've actually had one of our books, go through Diamond. We've actually done a few signings here and there. We've hosted competitions. We, in one instance, we actually even had a Four Horsemen beer entitled Armageddon, which was done by Heroic Ale Works this past November, I believe. There are a lot of things, like, the conventions are a beast in and of itself. You aren't going to make a profit off of one convention. You need to hit multiple conventions, and you need to have a strategy. So, I'm not saying like have a strategy where. I mean, I guess you can take that as having a sales pitch. We deal with it in different ways. So we have one of the best hype men of all time to pitch our stuff, which would be Dougie P or Douglas Pendleton. And if you've ever been to one, to a table, if you ever run across us at Awesome Con or Baltimore Con, you'll understand what I'm saying. Like, he's really, really engaging. And then when you pair him with David Welcher, the D&D connection, I mean, you're almost guaranteed to walk away with pretty much everything we have on the table. But that's because we're engaging. I mean, it transitions from salesmanship to being personable. And we invite people to come back. So we love holding panels at conventions. We love to engage anybody and everybody about what we're offering. And, we've had more than our fair share of naysayers or people that constantly have a negative tinge toward them, where they're looking for every little thing that's wrong in anything that you're doing. This is off, that's off, oh, what about this? And the thing is, comics is, and this is something else that we've had to learn over the years too, is that you want, being an indie creator, you have the inclination to try to put out the best product that you can. And you still want to do that. However, there comes a moment when you have to reconcile with yourself and your production that, oh, we're putting this out and we're hitting the deadline. We're hitting the publication deadline. Where are we going to go? Now, I'm not saying exactly cutting corners. I'm saying, as a creator and or creative type, there's always that need to look back over your artwork or look back or read back over your script and be like, I can do this better. I can do this better. I can let you know, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Jose or Dave. I'm going to speak on behalf of me personally. I am one of the writers on For Armageddon, and all the issues that are out now, I have scripted them, and I have plotted them alongside David Welcher. He has done some dialogue edits. I hate every single one of those issues when I go back and read them. I hate every single one, because as the story progresses, you learn your characters. And when I say you learn your characters, you learn your characters as you learn your kids. So you set guidelines to how they're going to grow up. You are a walking example of how they're supposed to live their life. Characters are kind of essentially the same way. You have outlined where their story is, what you want them to do, what powers they have, what personalities they have. The thing is, what you cannot anticipate is when you make those characters interact with other characters and you throw them into a particular situation. So when that happens, things just kind of go out the way. So once again, you have kids, you have trained them, you have taught them, you have guided them. You send them to school, they meet other people, other kids that do not necessarily have that same guidance and training and home. They don't have the same lessons at heart that you have instilled into your kids, and so they fray. They do things that you wouldn't expect them to do. Not necessarily that that's a bad thing, but they're getting more experience. They're growing. They're turning into their own person. The characters, at least when I write them, it's once I get past the first two issues. Pardon me. Once you get past the first two issues of a series, those characters have a way of controlling the tempo. So there are specific moments in every single Four-Armageddon issue where when I wrote it, I had no idea what was going on. It seemed cool on one hand, and I knew I needed to do something with a certain character to introduce him to the story to kind of set a plot line going. But outside of the main plot line, I remember I wrote one scene. I think it was dealing with famine, horseman famine, and I wrote it either in issue 49 or 48, one of the two. I had no idea where I was going with it, and it wasn't until I wrote issue number 45 where it started to kind of dawn on me how that connected to the overall scheme of the story that I was weaving, and it came naturally. It wasn't forced. It wasn't like I need him to be here and this is where it was going to go. I don't have a problem, and maybe this is why I'll probably never be a great writer, is because I don't have the craftsmanship to weave those intricate details. I try my best. I try my best. I definitely do what I can. I go over everything meticulously. I have multiple people look at it. But I mean, once you get into a flow, you get into a flow, and so, that's kind of where it is. So back to the topic at hand. Sorry, I went off on a tangent for a second. There are many parts of a publishing company. So even looking back now, I've had many conversations with Dave and Jose and Doug about whether we should have probably started with one book. Maybe we would have done better. And then I look at other people. There's a lot of indie creators that I follow that I bought their books from, and I mean, essentially, they're going through the same thing as we're going. I know one particular enticement that is there for most creators, I'm going to say, especially if you have ambitions of starting your own publishing company, is growing too fast, bringing on too many people, releasing too many properties. And the thing is, it has become, like, I see very stark differences in indie companies that, let's say, use Kickstarter constantly. I don't use Kickstarter. I'm not a particular fan of Kickstarters. You know what? I'm not going to get into that. That's a personal gripe that I have of mine. I'm just going to say that if you have, we have C3 Comics has Intrepid, we have No One to Save, we have Four-Armageddon, we have Shonen Double Feature. Soon to be released, we have Chibi 4, Fret. All these things have managed to manifest over time, and each one nothing was added into the fray obscurely. Intrepid was and is the flagship title of C3 Comics. It is the beginning, it is the foundation of our second wave universe, which is our superhero universe, which, as I told you before, we got this project started back in the 90s. So I know right now the superhero bent, people try to veer away from it, but that's at our origin, that's at our core. Superheroes, that's what we wanted to do. We felt we had stories to tell, and we can't we can't veer from that just because that's not where things are right now. However, because that is where most people say they don't want to go, and especially when you have companies like Image that don't necessarily focus on superhero stories. They focus on just stories, sci-fi, horror, drama, whichever. Then that goes into marketing, advertising. How are you actually going to do those plans? How are you going to promote that? So that's the issue in and of itself. For Armageddon is not a superhero comic. It's not a religious book. It is it's its own beast in its own right. However, that's now two publications that you have to market, that you have to figure out how to reach. Are you reaching the same people? Are you shooting for the same people? Will these people, will this clientele, will this reader of Intrepid like what's being delivered in For Armageddon? It's two separate things. I like both of them. They have a different pace to them, but it might not be someone's cup of tea. I don't know how to reach those people. I can honestly, I don't like to categorize our properties. And that's essentially from just becoming a fan of manga and anime over the past 20 years. When I started watching manga, it was, Dragon Ball Z came on channel 20, I believe. Then I watched Ninja Scroll, the movie. I watched, Akira. I mean, those were pretty much the mainstays that I watched then. It wasn't as prevalent now. I mean, Ronin Warriors. I don't really remember Ronin Warriors, but I do remember watching it. And now, I've grown up with, I've started to get more entrenched into the story structure and the character structures of anime and manga. And I can tell you, I started to, because the Four Horsemen story is, radically different from what it was originally. It was originally kind of like watching a Dragon Ball Z episode, like specifically the Cell Saga. Just chaos everywhere. I mean, 30 episodes, just someone charging up. Complete nonsense. But it's not that anymore. And it's not that anymore because Dave and Jose for years hammered me. Get into One Piece, get into One Piece, get into One Piece. And it wasn't them hammering me. It was the fact that they were making references out of One Piece, and I could not follow because I didn't watch it. So, Zoro and Usopp. This has happened, that happened. You're fighting Crocodile. Luffy's fighting Crocodile. Oh, Luffy has gone to second gear. I had no idea what they were talking about, and it got frustrating creatively because I couldn't. It was getting hard to even be in the conversations about my own creations, our own creations, until I dwelled into the world that they were in. And I guess it made sense because somewhere along the way, David and Jose started to say that our company was an American manga company. And it is. We don't have a different approach from anybody for writing or, presenting our stories. However, say with Second Wave Universe, our superhero universe, it's plotted out completely, the entire thing. Now, whether we add stories in, whether we add characters in, we know beginning, middle, and end where this universe ends. Now, I'm pretty sure it's going to outlive all of us because if we were to start distributing the Second Wave universe, starting with Intrepid #1 through Diamond, again, this upcoming January, it would take 30 years to complete that story with monthly publications, sometimes going into monthly publications because I think it actually grows to about 9 to 10 titles, monthly titles, once it gets to certain parts. So it's not just like, 6 months down the line, there's going to be 9 titles coming out. No, it's not that. Some take a few years to actually matriculate, but it's 30 years. That's 30 years that we've charted out That's 30 years that we might not see because just getting older in the game. But for Armageddon, it's 50 issues set in 3 parts, just like Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z starts in the middle with Dragon Ball, and then I guess now Super, but at the time it was GT. So those two sandwiched Dragon Ball Z, whereas For Armageddon is the middle of the story. The first part is called For Rebellion Wars, and the final part is called For Forgotten Realm. I can't get into any of those right now. But I will explain kind of somewhat what that is in another segment. But back to what the question was. Why have I never heard of C3 Comics? Well, hopefully now you're hearing of C3 Comics. We are trying to increase our social media footprint, trying to get, because I believe that we have produced, for people that had to learn along the way, for people that don't, we aren't artists. I used to be able to draw. I used to draw, but I have carpal tunnel in both of my wrists. I can't do it. I can't sit there for hours and hours and draw anymore. I don't have the patience to. I don't have the patience to do it. I enjoy writing. I enjoy sitting down for hours and just zoning out into space. I don't have the same passion for art, even though I can still draw, so I can help the artists out in different ways. Character sketches or whatnot. But you'll never see it in art. You'll never see it. It's not. Whatever. So I am trying to increase the social media footprint on that C3 Comics has. One moment.